Now, the rest of the story. Bill was a small-town boy with little education, but a lot of dreams. Bill wanted to become a big-time actor. The fantasies were fed by road shows passing through Bill's hometown. Bill even got to know some of the actors in the various companies. He listened eagerly to their glorious stories. One day, when Bill was 23, he learned of an opening in one of those theatrical troupes. An actor had died. Now the company was looking for somebody to replace him. Bill saw this as his now-or-never big chance. He tried out for the company. He was hired with the understanding that his pay would be low, his parts would be small, his responsibilities would include some of the odd jobs that nobody else wanted. But Bill didn't care. He was on his way to the big city, and soon he would actually be performing on a big city stage. Years of unglamorous bit parts lay ahead, years of crowd scenes and walk-ons, minor character roles. Sometimes the young man portrayed old men. Other times Bill appeared in drag. Often it seemed that he was no more than a prop in the profession of theater magic, but Bill must have loved it because he certainly stuck with it. There is one show business theory, a formula for stardom, which states that the successful actor is the one who merely outlasts his competitors. Well, we do know Bill paid his dues and learned his craft. Gradually, his roles became more important, and eventually he did become a star. By the age of 34, he was commanding big salaries. He had distinguished himself first as a comic actor, then as a fine dramatic actor, often cast as a romantic leading man. Bill's position in the theatrical company was strong enough to earn him points. That is, a piece of the action, and yet the real-life roles of stage star and company shareholder, only a decade before the very height of his hopes, would leave him longing for even higher honors in the theatrical community. You see, somewhere along the way, Bill had developed the urge to become a dramatic writer. Established authors found this amusing. Some even viciously scorned Bill's audacity, for Bill was attempting to cross that line which separates the creators from the recreators. That simply was not done. To be a competent dramatist required a university education, and the elitists argued that Bill's was a grammar school education, a stage-struck small-town boy, a mere actor whose ability as such hardly entitled him to a literary career, and yet Bill's critics had missed the point entirely. Because Bill was an actor, he wrote dialogue with an actor's intuition. He identified with those for whom he was writing, and for that actors have been grateful ever since. In the beginning, he had sought only to supplement his actor's income by accepting whatever hack writing jobs came his way. Surely he never imagined where it would all lead. All that you've just heard, though, really happened, near as any scholar can judge, 400 years after the fact. You see, Bill's livelihood, his principal occupation, was acting, although he managed to write more than 36 plays as well. And despite those who criticized him for crossing the line, he would be remembered as the greatest playwright of all time. The actor who dared to become a playwright, William Shakespeare. And now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. William Shakespeare was born in this house, John Shakespeare's house, in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564. Stratford-upon-Avon, what locals simply call Stratford, is about 90 miles northwest of London. The upon-Avon portion of the title just means that the town is located along the Avon River. William's father, John, was a successful glover, a glove maker. It is from that occupation that the last name Glover originated. William's mother, Mary Arden, was from a prominent landowning family, so William's isn't really a rags to riches story. Many biographers agree that Shakespeare was educated at the free public school in Stratford called King's New School. The upper crust would have snubbed their noses at a public school education. A lot of Shakespeare's life remains a mystery. We know that he married 26-year-old Anne Hathaway in 1582 when he was just 18 years old. Scholars refer to the period from about the mid-1580s until 1592 as Shakespeare's lost years. Other than the birth of his children, we know very little. Many biographers have attempted to fill in the several-year gap with little success. They do agree that Shakespeare had to have begun writing during this period because his plays were being performed on the London stage by 1592. We know this because competing playwright Robert Greene attacked Shakespeare in print in that year. In the tract, Greene referred to Shakespeare as an upstart crow. Robert Greene said, "There is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is as well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country." For over 400 years, scholars have tried to determine Greene's meaning here. Most of them conclude that Greene was saying, in not so simple terms, that Shakespeare, with his grammar school education, was reaching far beyond his rank in trying to match the talent of the university-educated playwrights, one of which was Robert Greene himself. Greene's attack in his groat's worth of wit is the earliest surviving mention of Shakespeare's theater work. Shakespeare became a member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the leading players or actors company in London. His association with the company made him wealthy. In 1597, Shakespeare purchased the second largest house in Stratford-upon-Avon. 2 years later, some of the members of Lord Chamberlain's Men, including Shakespeare, built the Globe Theatre on the south bank of the River Thames in London. By this time, having the name Shakespeare attached to a production drew large crowds. Today, we call this branding. Even after he became a famous playwright, Shakespeare still acted in his plays as well as some written by others. In 1613, Shakespeare retired from acting in professional writing. On June the 29th of that same year, the Globe Theatre burned down during a performance of Henry VIII. 3 years later, on April 23rd, 1616, William Shakespeare died. He was 52 years old. Only a month earlier, Shakespeare had signed his last will and testament. In one of the first lines of the will, Shakespeare said he was in perfect health. Now, historians have been unable to determine how or why he died. For more than 300 years, the exact location of the Globe Theatre remained a mystery. But in 1989, a small part of the building's foundation was discovered by the Department of Greater London Archaeology. In 1997, 384 years after the Globe Theatre burned, a modern reconstruction of the Globe called Shakespeare's Globe opened just 750 feet from the site of the original theater. Today, people flock to the Globe Theatre just as they did in the 1600s to see one of Shakespeare's plays or just to take a tour of the theater. In 2010, I watched a performance of Shakespeare's Henry VIII at the Globe, the same production that was being performed when fire destroyed the original Globe Theatre. I enjoyed it thoroughly, although I did struggle to understand the thick British accent speaking Old English at times. Now, if you plan to visit London, I would highly recommend seeing one of Shakespeare's plays in the reconstructed Globe Theatre. You won't regret it. Earlier, I said Robert Greene referred to Shakespeare as an upstart crow. There's a British sitcom called Upstart Crow, which is based on the life of Shakespeare from 1592 onwards. It's one of my favorites. The comedy is easy to understand, unlike some of Shakespeare's plays. And you know, I bet William Shakespeare, back in the late 1500s and early 1600s, had no idea we would still be celebrating his talents over 400 years later. Someone once said of Shakespeare, he was not of an age, but for all time. He was not of an age, but for all time. Wow. I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And as Paul Harvey would say, good day.